Hi there, and welcome to Steps Together, the Steps for Development podcast, where we come together to learn and build our own skills to help the children in our lives to thrive and succeed. I'm your host, Deb Johnson, and I'm so glad you're here. No matter what your role is in a child's life, you've come to the right place to learn about child development and kids who are differently wired. Here, you'll learn about the whys behind challenging behavior, practical strategies that really work, and how to advocate for and support all children as you become empowered with tools and skills that bring lasting change. Today, I want to talk about what I call foundations of brain health. There are 5 areas of health and wellness that current research is really showing makes a difference. It makes differences in our physical health and our mental health. And it's just that these are areas of everyday living that we can all make changes and see the benefits in terms of our, again, mental health, our nervous system regulation, our physical health, decreasing chronic diseases and things like that. And these areas are so very important to talk about, especially for our children with neurodiversity, children with neurodevelopmental conditions, because children who are differently wired might struggle with one or two, or sometimes all 5 of these areas of health and wellness. And it's really important for us as parents and professionals, educators, caregivers, to be able to provide some support that can mediate some of the challenges that our neurodiverse children are experiencing in these areas. So just because a neurodivergent brain doesn't naturally sync with optimal wellness routines or what is being recommended for the typical population, it doesn't mean that we can't support them. And it isn't a parenting failure when our children struggle with some of these areas, because the reason they struggle is rooted in their neurodiversity. So we just have to figure out ways that we can support them in these 5 vital areas of health and wellness so that they can have the best benefit and maximize their outcome. So with no further ado, I'm going to finally tell you, what are those 5 areas of health and wellness? They are sleep, nutrition, physical activity, social relationships, and stress reduction. So if you have a neurodiverse child, you're probably already thinking, well, they've got problems in all 5 areas. And again, that can be very, very common for some of our children. So what I want to do is go through each of these areas and just talk a little bit about why it matters, and then what can we do to support our neurodiverse kids so that the area of health and wellness is impacted as little as possible, or that we mediate some of the challenges that they're experiencing just to reduce the impact that it might have on our children. So let's start with sleep. Sleep is crucial. Research has shown over and over again that we all need our sleep. And, the recommendation is for 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night, and our children need even more. For example, a toddler should be sleeping 11 to 12 hours over the course of a day. And many of our children, especially autistic children, many of them are not sleeping. And it has to do with how they're hardwired. It is nothing that you've done wrong as a parent or a caregiver. It's simply because their brains are wired differently. Now, sleep is crucial for memory, emotional regulation, our sensory processing abilities, and our attention, our focus. Very often, a child who has sleep apnea may exhibit symptoms that are consistent with ADHD and have increased reactivity. Their nervous system is just elevated. And, if you are on more of the neurotypical range, you yourself probably notice when you're tired that you are overreactive, you're more emotional, maybe you're not remembering things as well, maybe you're more distracted. You're definitely feeling the stress. So, if as a neurotypical person, you experience that, or if you yourself are neurodiverse and you struggle with sleep, you can totally relate to what your child or the children that you're responsible for might be experiencing. Neurodiverse children are going to experience problems with their sleep for a variety of reasons, and it's going to vary from child to child. But some of the things that we notice are sensory challenges. And usually it's things like temperature or the textures of their bedding or their pajamas, or it's the noise, or maybe it has to do with the light. They either need complete darkness or they need light. They can't sleep without the lights on. Maybe they just have a hard time shutting their brains down and being able to make that transition to rest. And that might be rooted in problems with neurotransmitters, that they don't get enough serotonin and they're not relaxing and able to really allow their systems to fall asleep. Their nervous system is just always in high gear. Maybe they have anxiety and nighttime fears. Maybe there are vivid dreams and perhaps night terrors that persist well beyond the toddler years. In autism and ADHD, we very often see irregular circadian rhythms. So their bodies are just hardwired very differently, and they just aren't going to be on the same kind of sleep wake cycles that a more neurotypical person is going to experience. So, some of the ways that you can help your child in terms of sleep would be to start with attempts and hopefully success at establishing predictable and gentle bedtime routines using visuals, using schedules, using routines, finding the things that are very calming and organizing that support the transition from wake to sleep, and being as consistent as possible with those routines. Another thing is to consider creating what are called sleep-friendly sensory environments, right? That the sensory experiences in the bedroom are going to change so that they're more conducive to falling asleep. So there's lots of different things that you can do in terms of soothing music, low lights, absolutely reducing the visual stimulation, maybe helping your child to gradually become accustomed to sleeping in a darker space. Light is not good for sleep. Our brains absolutely need darkness. And so helping your child to get accustomed to that, maybe by gradually dimming the lights a little bit over the course of weeks, you might be able to get them to adapt so they can fall asleep without the lights. Avoiding screen activity. The recommendation is minimally 30 minutes before bed. However, most medical and sleep experts will recommend 2 hours before bedtime with no screen activity. So I know that can be very challenging and very difficult. The reality is that the blue light from our computer screens does impact our brain, according to research. And just the way that scrolling and watching videos, the fast pace of social media, it's not good for our adult brains. And it certainly can be overstimulating for our children's brains. Now, that said, I recognize that many parents will use screens, tablets, laptops, phones, TVs, whatever it is, to support sleep. And making a shift away from that is going to be challenging. I'm not telling you it's going to be easy. You should never try something cold turkey. I encourage you to set realistic expectations and make gradual changes, right? In the spirit of my favorite habit guy, James Clear, we want to change habits 1% at a time, incremental changes for either building habits or breaking habits. We need to be realistic about that. And it's important to separate what is self-regulation behaviors from your child potentially being bad. So, for example, your child waking at night is a regulation issue. It's the physiology of your child's nervous system. And for whatever reason, their circadian rhythms are causing them to wake up at night. And I want to encourage you to shift your mindset so that you're not seeing that as your child being bad and your child not listening or not following directions by staying in bed. And the goal is then to be better and better and to try to work towards something that is more effective and supports the sleep, but not to expect perfection. Again, it is natural for sleep cycles to be disrupted in our neurodiverse children. Our goal is to simply be always trying to improve it, always trying to make it better. And right now, for you, maybe that's finding an effective way to help your child go back to sleep when they do wake up during the night, because they wake up maybe 2 or 3 times. Expecting them to sleep all the way through the night is not the realistic goal. But we do want to try to support getting to as much sleep as possible because we know how very important it is. All right, the second foundation is good nutrition. Our body needs nutrition. We need essential fatty acids for brain development and brain functioning. We need a balance of fats and carbohydrates and proteins. We need a certain number of calories. And, what we take in is fuel for our body and our brain. It fuels our attention, our mood regulation, our general energy level. It's important that we have balanced blood sugar levels, for example. Children who are experiencing hypoglycemia in the middle of the day are probably going to have increased distractibility, potentially irritability, and be more prone to outbursts, emotional dysregulation. So in addition to just, fostering good growth, nutrition fuels our body in so many, many different ways. Here's the challenge. Your child might be a picky eater or even a problem feeder. Maybe your child eats 10 or fewer foods. This is a real dilemma. Maybe your child lives on chicken nuggets and goldfish crackers. It's not a lot of essential fatty acids there. Maybe your child is super sensitive to smells, temperatures, the texture of the food. Maybe it's the sight of the food. Maybe they go on food jags. So for months, they've only eaten Cheerios, dry Cheerios for breakfast. And now all of a sudden they've switched and they want a breakfast bar and they're only eating strawberry breakfast bars and they've completely stopped eating Cheerios. We call those food jags, where they're so super rigid and they just want the exact same thing over and over and over again. And maybe they experience a lot of anxiety when you produce new foods. There may be executive function challenges that are interfering with meal times, just the routine, the organization, the transition, leaving play activities, coming to the table, being able to stay focused and actually eat their food and not get distracted, being able to eat within a 20 or 30-minute time frame, as opposed to taking an hour and a half sitting at the table and still not having finished their peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So many, many challenges that can interfere with your child getting good nutrition. Some of the things that you can do are to be number one, providing predictable routines and habits. So, one of the first things we always encourage parents to do around food is to make sure that your child is eating at structured times. Many of our kids will graze all day long, and it works. They get food in them. The problem is they don't ever really experience being hungry, and they never have to put off that hunger. And then they don't appreciate the satiation that comes when they do eat their meal. So having some sort of a structure, breakfast is at this time, breakfast, lunch, dinner at set times, maybe then two smaller meals or snacks in between, maybe even three. So you have breakfast and then a snack, and lunch and a snack, and dinner and a snack. So, we would consider that like 6 meals over the course of the day. That's fine. The thing that is most helpful is having them at set times during the day. Now, that doesn't mean rigid times. It means some flexibility, but that at, generally speaking, between 7 and 7:30, we eat breakfast. Between 10 and 10:30, we have a snack. Between 12 and 12:30, we have lunch. Between 2 and 2:30, we have a snack. Between 5:30 and 6, we eat our dinner. Between 7:30, we have a snack before bed. And that becomes the routine instead of allowing your child to just graze through the entire day. Offering the foods that are safe for your child, the foods that they're jagging on, the foods that they want, along with exposure to other foods. One of the ways you can do this is to incorporate at least one meal a day where the child is eating with other people, even if it's only one other person. It's 2 people sitting and eating their meal together. This is the way your child gets exposed to what other people are eating, to all those other foods, and they see the other person modeling eating other foods, possibly eating the same foods that your child is eating, but also eating other foods. Other things that you can do to help your child expand their variety and reduce the anxiety they feel around foods is to use sensory play. So just outside of meal times, let your child finger paint with pudding or make necklaces with macaroni and cereal. There are many, many different activities. You can scour the internet, find things on social media about how to play with food. You can encourage your child to join you in the kitchen, and you can have fun with food, making faces, for example, in the peanut butter before you put the 2 pieces of bread together, or creating snacks that are, ants on a log, celery and peanut butter and raisins, or using fruit and vegetables in different creative ways, or just even making any kind of snacks that your child will eat. To whatever capacity your child has, I encourage you to bring them into the kitchen early and often so that they can be exposed to food. And what I want you to focus on is stability, consistency, and nourishment, not perfect nutrition. You can provide supplements. We can give our children multivitamins. We can give them targeted vitamins for things they're lacking. Like if they have anemia and they need iron supplements, we can give our children omegas, fatty acids. They can get those essential fatty acids through fish oil and other kinds of omega supplements. There's many different ways. So focus on exposure and nourishment as opposed to perfect nutrition. And then please rest assured that I know you are doing the very best you can. Your child has this neurodiversity that is contributing and causing this issue with nutrition. So it's a journey, and it is a long journey. It's a marathon. We don't solve feeding problems overnight. Feeding therapy takes a long time, takes a lot of consistency, and we just never know how far or how fast it's going to go. So I don't want you to see poor nutrition as a crisis I want you to see it as a journey. And if your child is struggling with nutrition and you do have concerns medically and for their growth and their development, please consult your primary care physician to discuss that. Maybe feeding therapy would be helpful. Number 3 in our foundations for healthy brains and nervous systems, for our health and wellness, is being physically active. This is so very vital. It helps us to process sensory input and have our brain, take in information through all of our senses, including our vestibular, our proprioceptive, and our interoceptive systems, where we're experiencing the movement and our brain is having to integrate all of this sensory input. So very good for our processing and our thinking. It supports our attention, our learning, our sleep. It encourages our nutrition because we get hungry when we are physically active. And it supports our brain function. There's absolutely some studies out there that have come out in the last maybe 5 years or so, showing how rigorous exercise, vigorous physical activity prior to having to focus and concentrate has significantly supported individuals with ADHD so that they focus and concentrate better. There is a valid scientific reason for giving movement breaks within an academic setting. And physical movement can be very calming and regulating to the nervous system, and it can also serve to invigorate and to arouse our nervous system. So it can work both ways for the children who are prone to escalating, right, and very dysregulated, and they can actually use physical activity to help bring themselves down. Or those children that are kind of bumps on the log, right? They're just sitting and sedentary and they're not very alert and aroused and interested in the world around them. We can encourage activity, which then increases their level of arousal or alertness so that they're in a more ready state to learn. The challenges that our children have are often related to just physical movement. Maybe they have dyspraxia or motor coordination and motor planning challenges. You might have heard of those terms in occupational or physical therapy, that they have motor planning problems. Maybe they have low endurance, and maybe they have what we call weak core muscles, and sometimes you'll hear it called postural instability. So they're just sort of, again, limp, and they like to sit a lot. That physical activity is just too much for them. They very often, because of these physical challenges, coordination problems, low endurance, muscle weakness, motor planning problems, they aren't able to keep up with peers. They don't engage as naturally in physical activity during recess times, for example, or after school with their friends. And they don't like to do sports, so they're not likely to join structured activities. They don't want to do those sports activities, or if you sign them up, they just kind of stand off to the side. And many children are overwhelmed by the sensory input, the sensory demands. Playing basketball, for example, in a school gym, there's all kinds of noises and visual input that can just be overwhelming. So choosing the right physical activity is really, really important for your child. So what are some things we can do to support our kids with being physically active? Well, we can incorporate movement into their daily routines, right? We can encourage them to push, pull, and carry things throughout the house, that they have to go upstairs to get their backpack. We don't keep their backpack just right by the door. We make them go up the stairs and come back down again, so that they have to, to get their things to head off to school. Know your child's preferences. Do they prefer sedentary? Then we want to try to encourage more movement. Are they extremely physically active? Maybe we want to encourage heavy work. We want to encourage focused activity, physical activity, as opposed to just letting them go, crazy on the trampoline or whatever, because that just causes them to escalate. So we really need to know our children and understand what makes them tick, so to speak. We want to try to create space for movement breaks, whether that's during homework or in the academic setting. Maybe it's within a religious service that you know in between certain parts you need to let your child get out and run. And it's okay for your child to do whatever movement brings them joy. Maybe it's just dancing it out in your living room, and they don't want to do a soccer team. They don't want to play in a soccer league. Maybe they really love bowling. Bowling is a fine physical activity. They don't have to be a basketball star. So celebrate whatever physical activity your child is capable of, and slowly, gradually try to encourage that physical activity. And don't be discouraged if there's days where your child just doesn't want to be physically active. That's okay. Again, we are working in a process. We are trying to just work towards including more physical activity. And maybe what you and your child find as rewarding is taking walks on a daily basis. Maybe every evening you're going to take a walk with your child, and that serves as physical activity and times of connection and engagement with your child. So again, it's a process, and we're going for the journey. Don't look for perfection. The fourth area that we want to focus on is your child's capacity for social relationships and connection. Research is showing us that human beings are wired for social interaction, right? This came out in the last 5 years without a doubt. We know for our mental health, we all have varying levels of need. Some of us are much more extroverted and get our energy from being with others. Some of us are more introverted and we don't need as much group time and social time. But at the end of the day, we all need at least one person to be able to connect with for our social well-being and our mental health. Our human brains are wired for co-regulation. When we have a close relationship with other humans, it reduces our stress and it boosts our resilience because we know we have support. We have our person. We have somebody we can count on. It helps us feel safe. It helps us learn how to attune our connection with others and improves our social connection moving forward. And it supports our capacity for learning and adaptive behavior. Now, our children are going to experience difficulties with this. They may have social anxiety. They may become easily overwhelmed in groups. They may have difficulty reading social cues and engaging in those social interactions. They may be driven to mask, and they're exhausted when they are in social situations because they're spending all their time trying to pretend that they are someone who they are not. That's masking. That's exhausting for anybody. Maybe you yourself often experience that exhaustion that comes from masking when you're with other people and you feel like you need to pretend so that you can fit in or belong to that group. And many of our children, many of you, may have a preference for deep selective relationships rather than broad social circles. And that's okay. Our society, our culture might push for more broad social engagement, but it is perfectly acceptable if what your child desires is deep emotional connections with just a handful of people, or maybe just one or two people. The important piece is that there be some sort of connection. So strategies that you can use are, number one, focus on the quality, not the quantity of the social experiences. So if your child only has one or two close friends, it's okay. Try to just give them as much quality as you can, where they have time to really get into those deep connections and get to know those peers. Provide your child with structured, low pressure social opportunities. It's perfectly fine to schedule play dates and encourage your child to meet other people. Just remove the pressure that everybody they meet is going to become a friend, because that's just not true. It's not true for you, and it's not true for them. So, low pressure social opportunities for engagement. Recognize their capacity for social activities and respect their boundaries, their need to limit that social engagement. So maybe they can only handle 30 minutes. Maybe that's it. Then at the end of the 30 minutes, take a break or just end the engagement, right? Build slowly and build the time in social activities with respect to your child's capacities. And lastly, help your children find their people, find their crowd, find the people they connect with. It might be a group of people that have interests that are completely different from yours. If, for example, your child is a video gamer, they're going to get along with other kids who enjoy not only video games, but the same kind of video games that they enjoy. And maybe you aren't a video gamer and you don't get it, but it's important for your child to experience that social connection with the people who understand them, who share their experiences, who share their joys and their interests. Those are the kinds of friends that we as adults seek out, and it's important that you support your child to seek out those same kinds of friendships throughout their life, whether they're 4 years old or 14 or 24. We want them to find their people, like-minded souls, right? And again, do not go for perfection. Do not go for some sort of ideal social situation. It's a journey, and we're just trying to help our children to make the best of what they can in these areas within their needs, their strengths, and their challenges. The last section we're going to talk about, number 5, is being able to reduce stress. Because research shows over and over and over again that too much stress in our lives is a really bad thing. It increases the cortisol that's running through our system. It leaves us in a heightened limbic system state of dysregulation where we're essentially having like trauma responses. And the more stress we experience, the more that it interferes with our executive function skills, our ability to rationalize and reason and analyze and make good decisions. It interferes with our ability to engage in adaptive behavior. When we're under stress, we're more likely to revert to very maladaptive behavior. It makes it very difficult for us to learn, and absolutely impacts our emotional regulation and our ability to communicate effectively with those around us. And neurodiverse children often live in a state of chronic stress. And the reason is because they are experiencing sensory overload, increased social pressures. They are experiencing unpredictable environments when what they need is consistency and structure. They're having constant demands that are out of alignment with what's realistic to expect of them. They're being constantly reprimanded or corrected or steered in a different direction than what they really want to do. In the worst case scenarios, their preferences and needs are not being respected or even considered. The adults around them are just pushing them into what they think they should do. And they experience increased levels of general anxiety, perfectionism, and fear of failure. And they don't have a good sense of who they are. They lack self-confidence. And They don't know how to self-advocate. Nobody's taught them how to speak up and advocate for themselves. So how can you help your child to reduce their stress? How do you act as an agent of stress reduction for your child? Many things that you can do. You can help build predictable routines when that is what your child thrives on. You can decrease unnecessary demands and align the expectations of the demands with what your child is developmentally capable of. You can create regulation routines and rituals, whether that's sensory experiences, whether that's things like breathing or movement, whatever it takes. Maybe it's affirmations, maybe it's quiet time, reading stories. It's all the things that help bring their stress level down. Maybe it's allowing them unstructured, repetitive play that the neurotypical community calls stimming, right? They just need to stim. That's what their brain wants. That's what feels good to them. It's okay to let them do that. That's an important piece of who they are. You want to offer co-regulation. Be their person who helps them regulate instead of doling out consequences when your child is overwhelmed and stressed and dysregulated. Be the one who helps guide them back to regulation. And protect their downtime. Rest is so very productive. Your child does not have to be therapized all day long. Your child doesn't have to be in a constant state of learning and changing and meeting the demands of other people. Sometimes they just need to be. They just need to play in their own way. They just need to rest in their own way. They just need to be. So I hope that this has been helpful to touch on these 5 areas of health and wellness in helping you to learn how important these areas are for our development, our health, our well-being, and how they might be affected in terms of your neurodiverse child. And I hope you've taken away some strategies in one or more of those areas that you are going to try for your child, whether it's to improve their sleep, maybe modify their nutrition, support their physical activity, help them make better social connections, and certainly, absolutely, if you're going to do only one of these things, help reduce their stress levels. Understand that while each of these areas is independent in and of themselves, they absolutely intertwine. So when you support one, you are going to be also supporting all the other 4. And you do not need to try to fix all 5 of these areas. Pick one, pick just one area, pick one strategy that you want to try. 1% change, incremental change, small little changes on a day-to-day basis add up to a big impact and exponential change. So please keep in mind that you're not failing if these areas are hard and challenging for your child and maybe for yourself. Know that your child is not being difficult or resisting. They're not being bad if they don't sleep well or eat right. It's that they're showing you what their nervous system can handle, and they're showing you their challenges, which present moments of opportunity where you can support and maybe affect some change down the road. Remember that small, sustainable steps are what lead to the biggest changes. Do not make big changes. Do not try to go cold turkey on things. Small, sustainable steps are what matter. And focus on creating a supportive environment, which includes not just the physical world around your child, but also the way you interact and support them. We want a supportive environment that provides them with safety and consistency. We're not looking to enforce compliance and change. Start by just providing the support. Remember that brain health grows from meeting basic needs. It doesn't need advanced interventions. All it takes is you noticing on a day-to-day basis what you can do to support in a different way. Make those small changes and you're going to see meaningful improvements down the road. I hope you can choose one thing to focus on in the next week or two and celebrate the small steps. Right? Celebrate the little wins on a day-to-day basis. And rest assured that you're doing better than you think. Because just by being here and listening, it tells me that you want to make a change. And that's where everything starts. So thank you for joining me today. I hope again that this podcast is helpful for you. I so appreciate you being here and listening. I hope you're sharing with others. And I hope to see you on the next episode of Steps Together. Take care. Bye for now.